Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the Valley of the Judged. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me, as always, is my good brother here in the temple, the man with all of your probing questions and even more probing answers, good brother Nephenor.
Greetings, greetings. I bring peaceful co-pay existence.
For a second, I thought you were saying Coldplay existence.
No, not Coldplay. Copay. After all, I am now the insurance alien. No, I'm kidding.
But obviously, as far as where Zan is, I explained that in an update on both the server and on all of my social medias. Nephenor has graciously opted to take his spot on the Friday shows for this kind of thing. And
that is correct. Zan has a job, unlike me.
And because of that, you had to scramble a little bit to catch yourself up on the first couple chapters with this entry.
Reading's no problem. I do it all the time.
Mm-hmm. So, since obviously I'm not going to redo the character creation section just for that, what did you think of how character creation works for the different types?
I liked it. That's neat, having completely different concepts for the three different groups there, and the way that they had different ways of dealing with it and different advancements. It's a nice change to see something that isn't all, everybody does the same thing, everybody gets the same thing at the same level. It's like, no, please give me some variety.
And I will admit, with the FF Legend project, everybody gets things at the same levels, but what those things are isn't always the same.
Yes, there needs to be variety. We don't want everyone coming out the same gray goo at the end.
Even the gray goo video game doesn't do that.
Which is good, because it actually knows what it's doing.
But it is kind of funny in hindsight that it refers to those three types as classes when they're really more like archetypes.
Heck, I'd even call them more, archetypes, or paths would be another way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
Although, considering that you can cross paths, which is an interesting thing also.
Yeah. The Fiend was the big addition when it came to Nocturne, because in previous Shin Megami Tensei games, the protagonist could not use any magic, which made putting points in intelligence kind of pointless. That's been a bit of a running joke for the longest time. 3 decided
they were stupid.
Yeah, I look at it as one of those artifacting issues. 3 decided to fix that through the whole Magatama thing with with those effectively acting as a symbiote within a fiend's body.
Your fiendish core.
Yeah. Which is why the protagonist in Nocturne is referred to as the Demi-Fiend or Hitoshura. The idea
And the fact that you can swap fiends, that's even cooler.
Yeah. The idea being someone with the body of a demon, but still a human soul. And I know that you haven't played Nocturne, but what did you think of the description of the post-conception Tokyo?
Well, it seems awfully round to me.
Yeah. Yeah, the Vortex world is very much that.
Actually, I was kind of amused at the way that they described it. My first thought was, oh, so it's now, Hollow Earth.
Yeah, fortunate though, I have no plans on running Hollow Earth anytime soon, or really ever.
It was amusing that I'm not just like, oh, that's an interesting thing to do. Let's just fold the world and make a hollow world.
Mm-hmm. It is somewhat amusing that when I think of my first introduction to the Hollow Earth concept, it was unfortunately World of Cinnabar.
Don't think I'm familiar with that one. I'm trying to remember that.
That was the one that had the flying bears with laser beam eyes.
No, I'm definitely not familiar with that. That just sounds hilarious.
I have a certain short list of games that is my unholy trinity, and World of Cinnabar is on that. It is a very infamous game in certain circles because of how the setting is interesting in a very cracked out Plan 9 kind of way, but actually running the thing is an absolute nightmare.
Oh, okay, the fact that you say it's cracked out and it's written by a guy named Raven C.S. McCracken.
Who... Raven doesn't seem like that bad of a guy.
But he is a McCracken.
But he's just a bit misguided when it comes to game design.
Yeah, and I like this. Referred to as Gonzo game features. Okay, that explains everything right there. You say Gonzo, that tells me everything.
Mm-hmm. Huh. It also had flying clams that could shoot fire, like they had a flamethrower for a mouth.
Oh wow! I didn't even realize that they had a Kickstarter for a third edition. I do like this though, that in 2022 it was announced there was an Easter egg in the new edition, and nobody has solved it yet.
Mm-hmm. But that is one part of my unholy trinity. Admittedly, it's at the bottom end of it because you've got stuff like Senzar, which I can describe as what happens when you're 10 years old and you think you can write a better D&D. And of course, at the top is Fatal, which needs no introduction.
Oh god.
Yeah, I read through Fatal cover to cover, and I'm both unashamed and ashamed to admit that. No matter how bad anyone thinks it is, I guarantee you it is infinitely worse.
And you're never getting that time back.
No, but it did give me perspective. So, with that in mind, I will note that there are going to be some aspects when we get into the way that mechanics work that are going to be a little bit familiar to you. Some of it you kind of saw, and obviously since you were with me on the whole Sword World adventure, you know that the way TTRPG design works over in Japan is not the same as it is in other parts of the world.
Yeah, I noticed that, especially with their entire concept of the flow of play, which actually definitely has a very different feel to it than what we're used to.
But getting past that, then we get the rules section, which we're going to be getting into this week, starting with beginning play, and first starting with some of the ground rules. First is rounding. Always round down. If you need to divide and multiply, do multiplication first. In other words, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally.
I do like the fact that they actually do given an official ruling on you should roll down or round down. That's something that some games miss out on, and then it ends up becoming a house rule that varies.
Or I think we've seen in some cases where sometimes they want you to round down, sometimes they want you to round up.
Yeah, it's a come on, be consistent, one or the other.
It's like pick a lane. We're tired of seeing you on the road. But then we have a thing on when outside the rules, which it in not too many words is basically the GM is final arbiter.
Rule 0.
And then we get into a thing on flow of play. Now, I think a lot of people would assume that something like flow of play would feel too gamist or something like that. But here's something that you have to keep in mind. A lot of people who get into tabletop through Japan do not have the wargaming background. That's not to say wargames didn't have their spot in Japan, but the chain of events did not go the same way. As much as the grognards are going to get pissed at this, to which I say fuck them.
No, that's the thing. Nobody's fucking them. That's why they're grognards.
True. The point is that the point of origin for a lot of people getting into tabletop over in Japan is through computer gaming or video games.
Which is why the flow of play very much sounds like a video game.
And hold on a sec, let me handle the echo. Sorry about that. That happens sometimes whenever I'm doing this kind of thing. It's a weird quirk of Discord.
Yeah, Discord needs to be spanked every now and then.
But anyway, the flow is warm-up, opening, research, dungeon attack, boss battle, ending, and cooldown. This was kind of covered in the character creation chapter, and it does hammer home something else that's a major thing you see in a lot of Japanese tabletop, and that is more scenario-based or episodic types of play.
Yeah, almost like it kind of reminds me in a way of the old sci-fi shows with their Monster of the Week kind of thing, or Alien of the Week.
And well, you do have a lot of Ultraman fans probably jumping into tabletop, and the origin point of Ultraman, Ultra Q, all the way back in the 60s, was heavily inspired by the Twilight Zone.
Oh god, I love that show. That's why it's on my shelf.
So all these kind of things are connected in different ways. Although personally, I like the Twilight Zone, but I like the Night Gallery more.
Didn't actually get into that one.
The Night Gallery was basically Rod Serling trying to do what he was doing just in color. It is more on the psychological or just weird fiction as opposed to the forays with science fiction that the Twilight Zone did.
Ah, okay. So a little more modern. I never actually got to catch that one.
And it's for the same reason I enjoyed like Ray Bradbury Theater when I could get it. Like obviously I can get it now, but for a while it was locked behind HBO.
And growing up, I also used to watch. Oh god, I can't even think of his name. The director who did Vertigo and Psycho.
Hitchcock.
Yeah, Hitchcock Presents.
Mm-hmm.
I used to watch that all the time too.
Yeah. But the one thing that I highlighted last week in the flow that I want to highlight here is the trailer concept. This is something I honestly think should be brought into more games. Setting up a trailer like you're setting up a trailer for a movie, but
that's a good idea. It kind of gives people something to understand where it's going.
because obviously over the last few years, Session Zero has become a thing where you establish the tone of the adventure. But the trailer concept is going one step further because it's scenario by scenario.
Yeah,
And
and it kind of gives you a way to present what this one's going to be focusing on.
yeah. Obviously, the opening, the research, the dungeon attack, we've covered that kind of thing. Some of this is somewhat reminiscent of a concept that you see a lot in storytelling across East Asia, but I'm most familiar with the Japanese wording of it, and that's Kisho Tenketsu, which is a kind of 4-act structure that you see. There's a version of it in Japan, in parts of China, in parts of Korea, just all over the place. It's even used in copy editing. That's how widespread that concept is. Instead of the rising action, climax, falling action of the 3-act structure, it is introduction, development, twist, and conclusion.
That's actually pretty similar to the way Pulp Fiction is written.
Mm-hmm. Well, there was a lot of Pulp Fiction that got distributed all over the place, especially by Ranpo Edogawa, just really helping get the mystery fiction subgenre off the ground in Japan, which I think is part of the reason why Call of Cthulhu has such a massive fan base in Japan.
That makes a lot of sense. Actually, it's just Lovecraft in general. I mean, if you look at it, even their anime shows Lovecraft's influence.
Yeah, and I think some of that is a carryover from those early pulp mysteries that were brought to the States. Ranpo Edogawa was a pen name used by an author who translated a lot of Edgar Allan Poe's work. That's where the Ranpo part of the name comes from. And kind of helps cement mystery fiction as this big thing in Japan.
Yeah, here it is. This is what I was looking for. In Pulp Fiction, their general formula is the Lester Dent, which is part 1, hit them with a lot of trouble. Part 2, double the trouble. Part 3, put the hero in so much trouble that there's no way out. And part 4, the punchline and wrap up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, I do like that they put in a thing about reviewing one another's characters, which, given how team dynamics can turn things sideways if you don't have a decent balance, that's a smart move to put in there.
Yeah, I like the fact that some games are actually getting to the point where they have stuff in them specifically during character creation of, hey, let's actually have the characters work to get the characters to have something beforehand so we don't have to do the whole you meet at a bar crap. I mean, Traveler does this extensively with their whole, you're making characters have connections with each other and giving each other skills in the process. And then there's Paranoia that does the whole you actually affect each other's character creation. This is something that's needed.
Yeah. The Cypher system has something like that as well, where you're asking or answering a question related to the person to your right.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. It's been a while since I've read Numenera.
See, then it goes into the scene overview, which is setup, interaction, conclusion, and break. As well as things like units and time and how you track in-game time. Now, some of these are fairly obvious, but when it comes to Kagatsuchi, this is where there's a bit of SMTism that I need to go into. So, for the longest time, there's been a major emphasis on moon phases within the SMT series. I'd say it's one of the big highlights. As you're going through dungeons, the moon is going through different phases, and the phase that the moon is in can determine how easy or difficult it is to negotiate with demons, or just the strength of your encounters. They're stronger during a full moon and weaker during a new moon. Obviously, there's no moon in this setup because Vortex World, but Kagatsuchi fills the same role.
So instead of phases of the moon, it's phases of the quote unquote sun.
Yes.
Which is hilarious if you think about it, considering the moon is literally just reflecting the sun anyway.
Mm-hmm. Well, solar flares are a thing, but fortunately there's no set amount of time between phases, but it's there to provide a bit of a guideline. The general guideline is per scene or per combat, advance Kagatsuchi by one phase. And you can see that it starts at phase 0, so a new moon. Then it goes all the way up to full. Then it goes all the way down to new, and rinse repeat. And of course, and then after all of that, we finally get into checks and skills, starting with the stats. Which I'd say the stats are going to be self-explanatory: strength, magic, vitality, agility, and luck. Every time you level up, you're adding one to them. If you're playing a human or a fiend, you have some control over what you level up. If you're playing a demon, you're at the mercy of RNG.
All hail RNGesus.
Mm-hmm. This is also where we get into the dice. This is using a D100 system.
And that I like. I've always been a fan of D100 systems. They give a little more flexibility for play.
Yeah. I've seen some people try and act like basic role-playing was the first D100. I still would say that the first was Metamorphosis Alpha, but I'm not going to 100% put my foot down on that.
In that case, it's more of a matter of which one is more well-known, and in that case, yeah, BRP does win.
If I want to really be pedantic, RuneQuest predates BRP. But
well, in a way, our BRP is formed from RuneQuest, so
But the target number is usually a relevant stat times 5 plus level plus modifiers. And that's what you're trying to roll a percentile under. There are 3 special effects, though. If you roll a 1, it's a crit. If you roll a 96 to a 99, it's an auto fail. If you roll a 100, it's a botch.
I love fumbles. They're always fun in a game.
A critical can also happen if you get equal to or less than 1/10 of the TM.
1/5. Oh, actually, hold on. It's got both there. Oh, if you possess might. Okay, I see. It's a completely different one.
Mm-hmm.
So might actually is 1/5, but everything else is 1/10. That's unusual.
Yeah, but when you roll a critical, you do double damage and you ignore resistance. So I think it makes sense that it's hard. That would be harder to do criticals in this setup.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And resistance is basically armor. So you're doing double damage and you're going right through armor and damage reduction.
Yeah, that makes a little more sense why you don't want to have that as easy.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, if you fumble, you fail and something worse happens. And you also become cursed, which expands your auto-fail range to 86 or higher. And until you're no longer cursed, you have a 30% chance each time you take an action to have something bad happen to you. We'll get into curses later in this series, but...
So what you're saying is, the dice gods show no mercy.
Amen.
Amen.
Yeah.
And in this game, they not only show no mercy, they will actually actively kick you when you're down.
Yep. And we have a nice little chart about what can happen depending on the type of check if you fumble. If you fumble to hit, you hit yourself or one of your allies. If you fumble a dodge, it's treated as if you got hit with a critical. If you fumble a negotiation tech, the target is enraged and combat ensues. If you fumble a save, the ailment remains and your HP and MP are halved. And any other check, GM's discretion.
Ah, yes, I love GM's discretion when it comes to checks like that, because that means they can have so much more fun.
Mm-hmm. Now, I will note, when it refers to skills here, it's not referring to skills in the traditional sense. It is referring to skills as in powers, spells, etc. This is in keeping with the source material. I do enjoy it fitting the theme and the fact that costs are paid before the check, and even if the check fails, the cost isn't refunded.
Which makes sense, especially when you're dealing with powers. You're gonna pump the power into it or pump the magic into it. If it fails, it fails. You don't get your money back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or should I say, you don't get your mana back.
Mm-hmm. Now, the general effectiveness of a particular skill is determined by power, which I guess I could liken to the way the power tables worked when we were doing Sword World. You're not having to deal with a big power table like you did with that, but it's the same general principle. Like this...
Yeah, that one was kind of a weird one. I had to get used to that.
Mm-hmm. The main reason it was done in something like Sword World is to provide a variety of results while still only using 2d6.
Wait. Certain buff or debuff skills may change the number necessary to score and explode? Do the dice explode?
They can.
Oh, I love exploding dice.
In fact, it goes right into that in Power Roll. For a Power Roll, roll 1d10 and use the number shown. Should you roll a 10, you get what's known as an explode. Roll 1d10 again and add that number to your previous. And the explosions are cumulative.
Oh, I love that.
So, and when it's talking about certain buff or debuff skills, it's referring to changing the range of exploding.
Kind of like we had with some of our skills in Sword World.
Mm-hmm. So then you have using 2d10 for power rolls. Some skills will indicate that they add a die to it, so in that case you're just rolling 2d10. And in that case, explosions still work, but only the die that is rolled as a 10 explodes. So if you roll a 10 and then a 1, you're only exploding one of the die.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Then, of course, we have things like skill modifiers, which is self-explanatory. Critical, you're doubling the total power. Affinity modifiers, basically elemental relationships. And fixed power. This is to replicate more high-end, or if you want to speed up the process when dealing with a bunch of NPCs. So instead of rolling any dice, just treat the roll as if you rolled 5.
That always makes things easier.
Yep. Then we have fate points, which I said last time were akin to the extra effort mechanic I've talked about in plenty of games. I know these days some people refer to them as meta-narrative or something like that, and I just find that pretentious, and I'm going to make fun of that phrase every chance I get.
Yeah, I like fate points. I just don't like Fate the system that much.
Yeah, I've talked about my issues with Fate, and every time I do, somebody tries to gaslight me. but your fate points are determined by 5 plus 1/5 your luck. And for each point spent, you can obtain one of the following effects. Reroll a roll you just made, change the TN of a roll you're making by 20%, or have the damage you or an ally is taking. And there's no cap on how many fate points you can spend, but you do have to spend them. Wait, what was that?
I don't know.
It sounded like somebody was backing up.
That must be on your end. I didn't hear anything.
Yep. Yeah, it is on my end. Sorry about that, folks. But
I didn't hear it on my end, so didn't come through the mic at least.
But then we have multi-action, and I'm pretty sure even in something like basic, this isn't present or even possible, I think. When you have a 100% or higher TN for a roll, you can choose to take a multi-action. It is basically taking the excess and putting it as its own thing. So
that actually is a really cool idea. I like that.
So if at high levels, because of the way stats are set up, the TN could get over 100. In that kind of situation, you can just shave 100 off and then roll again.
And then each time it goes over 100, so you get 200, then you get another 2 in action. It's like, that's a neat idea. I like that.
Or if you prefer, you can just cut your normal TN in half and do 2 actions with that lower amount, as shown in example 1.
Yeah, either way, that's a great idea.
Yeah. I think the only thing that comes close is an overrun rule in the victory point system in Fading Suns, where if the total of the attribute and skill is over 20, you can do an additional roll and just use that stat minus 20.
Yeah, this is a neat little idea. However, I know that wouldn't be possible in BRKP because you're probably never going to get above 100 anyway.
Mm-hmm. Not unless you're dealing with a ridiculously lengthy or ridiculously high-powered affair, and even that's a stretch.
Yeah, considering the way that they do skill enhancements, not likely.
Mm-hmm.
Because the higher your skills get, the harder it is to enhance them.
So you must have a 14-karat horseshoe stuck up your ass in order to do it. But you can multi-action more than just twice. But the amount that you do determines what you're dividing by. So in the second example, you have somebody who wants to use the Agi spell 3 times because they have a TN of 210%. So it ends up with them rolling 70%, but they still have to pay the MP cost for each time.
And that's gonna get costly quick.
And the other thing, you can't do if you're doing this, you're only doing that one effect. You're not doing, in this example, Agi and Bufu. You're casting Agi 3 times.
Sometimes Daka is the answer.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, auto pass skills can't be used for multi-actions. And you can use fate points to increase the TN if need be. Once the TN is divided, you can use fate points individually.
Oh, that's interesting. So, in other words, you could say for the second example there, you could split it up into 3 set 70, and then use your fate points to bring one of those to 90.
Mm-hmm. And you can do it. I think it's there to say if you can't just divide it a bunch of times and then try and bring it back up using fate points.
Yeah, exactly.
Or rather, you can do that. It's just going to be expensive as all hell. But after that, it goes into both reason and himorogi. Since as you no doubt saw when it came to the Vortex world, the central idea is someone will eventually approach Kagatsuchi with a sufficient reason for what form the new world will take.
Yeah, that was an interesting concept.
Mm-hmm. And admittedly, some of this is flavor, but it goes into reason. Like, the Vortex world, the world of Tokyo Conception, is the egg from which a new world will hatch. The old world has been scoured away in the Conception, and the one who stands victorious over the Vortex world will decide the reason, the founding principle upon which the next world will rise. Whosoever possesses reason strives to face the creator of this Vortex world, and then passes its judgment, which will then be able to create a new world via that reason. Currently, the top reasons in this world are called Shijima, Yosuga, and Musubi. And I mentioned this in a previous installment of this particular experiment. I honestly think Shin Megami Tensei has a better understanding of what alignment is supposed to be than the world's most litigious role-playing game does.
Yeah, this does seem a little more, at least, not balanced, I'd say, focused.
Consistent.
That too, yeah.
Because even with the good and evil part, there's much more of an emphasis on the relationship between law and chaos. Both of them, throughout the franchise, have been represented by either the Gaia Circle or the Gaia Cult, and the Messianic Cult. The Gaia Cult obviously representing chaos and has a very rule of the strong kind of attitude, whereas the Messianic Cult preaches order, but they want a complete stillness.
Yeah. Actually, come to think of it, when it comes to the whole order versus chaos and that kind of thing, another one that actually kind of got that right was Werewolf, the Apocalypse, when it was Weaver and the Worm, or Weaver in the Wild versus the Worm, with the Worm in the middle balancing them, at least originally.
Yeah, at some point it became about Gaia versus the Worm, and I didn't care for that, since I felt like maybe I'm off base, but I felt like the Worm was falling into a Moriarty problem, where so many things were because of the Worm's influence in one way or another that it just shrank the world.
Well, in a way, it was, but it also wasn't, because in that situation, the reason why the Worm was going the way it was because the Weaver had fucked it over.
Yeah, but point is, there are conditions for establishing a reason. Usually ideals, then summoning some sort of god that is going to be acting on your behalf. And there are many ways to gather what's known as Magatsuhi to accomplish that, and then eventually being judged, at least according to the scriptures of Miroku. But
I summon the dice god. He judges us all, and he judges us all unworthy.
Yeah, after that you have the different factions. So yeah, the Assembly of Nihilo, the Mantra Army, the Souls of the Amala Network, the Mannequins, the Fairy Kingdom, and the Shibuya Free City.
I am amused that the Fairy Kingdom is actually led by Oberon and Titania.
Mm-hmm.
At least they're following with that tradition.
Yeah. Now, where the PCs can factor into this is they can gain endorsement points, either through nurturing a Himorogi to summon an outer god, or contributing to a particular reason. You could see this as the faction system, but I do like that there's an understood assumption that you could make your own faction if you so chose. You know, with different tiers of it. at 50 or so EP, then you're conceded as an ally to that faction. At 100, you can get an invitation to become a leader within that faction, and to act as the representative of it to realize your own new world. You have to have at least 200. I'd liken it to how reputation worked when we were running Sword World.
Yeah, it actually kind of does remind me of a reputation system, whether you want to Sword World, WoW, or whatever. All of them seem to have something like that.
Yeah. And of course, if you so choose, you can use that accumulated EP to create your own faction.
The faction of the Dice Goblins. That's mine.
Yeah. Then it goes into Himorogi, which are a type of item that's important to this process. When a Himorogi is secured, then the PCs can start gathering Magatsuhi from demons that you defeat. 10% of a demon's XP value is transferred. And this can be used to grant special effects on a 1 per session base, but it costs 20 Magatsuki to do. And the 4 options are either Balance, remove all buff and debuff; Bless, cancel the effects of one skill or attack; Restore, completely restore a target, even from death, though fate points are not restored; or Release, remove all ailments. Then you can use then it goes into using Himorogi to summon an outer god with a 4-step process. 1, you need at least 200 endorsement points. In other words, you need to be the representative of a faction. You also need at least 50,000 Magatsuhi. Then, obviously choose a god from one of the 3 gods of Amala Temple, or from the high gods that do not appear as enemies or event bosses. The Amala
Now, I'm guessing when they're saying Michael, they are talking Archangel Michael?
Yes.
That does not surprise me.
Which would certainly fit within the other high gods that they bring up: Vishnu, Shiva, Amaterasu, Horus, and Odin.
Hell, even Scotty's in there, and that one kind of caught my attention.
Yeah.
And Albion.
I've seen a lot of people use the Megami Tensei games as their gateway drug to really start studying mythology, because both, whether it be the Shin Megami Tensei series or the Persona series, it is taking notes from a lot of different mythologies all over the world.
That's why I always enjoy those kind of games, like that and the Final Fantasy, because I'm like, oh, I recognize that god.
I know some people turn up their nose about the way some gods' names are used, but not to the letter of the original myth in, say, Final Fantasy. But I look at that as kind of missing the point.
Yeah, it's a gateway drug. It's getting people interested in it, and that's all that really matters.
I mean, I know I wouldn't want the Sumerian God King to show up as Gilgamesh in a Final Fantasy game.
That would be a little silly.
But him as this amalgamation of that and Benkei as he is in Final Fantasy, I'm perfectly fine with that, since it is using those as a starting point to create its own mythos. I think is the key. Neither approach is better or worse, they're just different.
And then, of course, there's the whole Fate series, and we get the Gilgamesh from there and his unlimited armory. I love that.
Yeah. Though, if I'm being honest, the story of Gilgamesh can be best summarized as bros before hoes.
That is a really, really good explanation.
Yeah, I used to have some of the myths explained books, and they do a really good job of summarizing various myths in the most cracked out way possible.
that's not cracked out. That's actually really cutting to the meat of the situation.
Mm-hmm. I think he referred to it as ultimate bromance, which is also accurate.
Hell, even when Picard tried to explain it, it pretty much came down to the exact same thing.
Yeah. I have described Greek myth as local thunderbolt ruins everything.
Actually, that one can be explained with a simple meme. No, Zeus, don't sleep with that. Too late.
I think somebody did the blight meme with Zeus going. Zeus being approached by any Greek hero. You banged my mom. Do you have the slightest idea how little that narrows it down?
Yeah, that's true. He pretty much did half the population of Greece.
Well, he is both Hercules' father and grandfather.
Wow, that's taken the grandfather paradox to a whole new level.
There's the implication that Hercules is descended from Perseus, who is another bastard son of Zeus, and of course, Hercules is one of the other sons of Zeus. So yeah.
Well, considering the whole entirety of Greek mythology includes a lot of incest among the gods, considering that Hera is literally his sister.
Yeah. And that's not even getting into Egyptian mythology, which, if I get into some of those stories, I'm probably going to get kicked off YouTube.
Oh, God. The web in them is just insane.
Mm-hmm. But getting back to the heart of the matter, then we get into combat. Now, a lot of the parts of combat are going to be pretty standard. You know, the way initiative works is going to be top down. It is a power roll, adding your agility stat. If you've got a tie, whoever rolled the highest, i.e., whoever had a higher natural roll, is going to be the tiebreaker. Honestly, whenever
what happens if they're both they both have the same everything?
In that kind of situation, I always say GM decides.
Yeah, that makes sense. Either that or roll off.
I think in one case I had it as a coin flip, but I didn't tell the players that the coin was rigged.
Oh, that's mean. I love it.
You know, tell one person that you got to pick heads or tails.
But you don't tell the other person, or don't tell either of them that both of them are heads, both sides.
Yeah, you know, heads I win, tails you lose.
Exactly.
Yeah. But during each person's turn in the initiative order, they get one action. If you don't want to take an action, you can just pass. And we do have the basic. We do have examples of, say, the basic strike. The check is strength, so you're rolling against your strength TN. It is a physical attack, so if that factors into affinities, then you deal with that. Targets one opponent. Skill potency is 0, i.e., that's how much that it's not adding to the skill. And power is base physical power. Obviously, then we have human weapon attacks. Only humans can use melee weapons or firearms to attack enemies. Fiends and demons can't. In fact, they can't use much in the way of equipment, period.
Yeah, I remember reading that. That was an interesting flavor. I like it.
It's a trade-off for all the other cool stuff that they get automatically.
Yes, when you get magic, you no longer can use gun. This is true. Ask any American.
Says the person who played a Magitech gunner.
Shh, different game, different world.
Yeah. But obviously one of the options is talk, since negotiation to recruit demons is one of the keystones of Mega 10. And of course, you gotta have it here. So you do have Aid, which mainly is a luck check, and if you pass it, you can give someone a 20% bonus to the end of their next action. But you do have to name the skill that the target has, as far as to determine what you're aiding. And if they take a different action than the one you called out, they don't get the bonus. I do like that setup.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you're going to say, hey, I'm going to help them do this, and then they don't do it, then, well...
It also means that you have to have some awareness of what your other allies can do. You could also do an aid-like equivalent to yourself with Concentrate, which, when you take a named action on a round following Concentration, you get a plus 20% bonus to the TN. Concentrating multiple times will make it stack. Once you take the named action, the Concentrate bonus is lost. Then you have Defend, which just gives you a plus 20% chance to dodge. And then
Piccolo approves of that.
Yep. Then Use Item, which is exactly what it sounds like.
Use Item. Gun.
Yep.
The most American thing you can do.
Then you have Attacks, which is self-explanatory. Your basic strike uses strength, your spell uses magic, physical attack skills use strength, and magical attack skills use magic. And you can, whenever an attack is a success, the target can attempt to avoid it by rolling a dodge check. If the dodge check is successful, then the attack is treated as a miss. If the attack roll was a critical hit, however, then a successful dodge only downgrades it to a normal hit. Only a critical dodge can fully negate a critical hit.
Yeah, that's actually similar to a couple of games I've seen where you have to, it's basically opposed rolls, and that makes perfect sense.
But what I like here is that there's no cap on dodging. That's always been a pet peeve of mine. You know, oh, you can only dodge or take the dodge action once per turn. Any other time, you've got to face roll it.
Yeah, that kind of does make no sense. If you're focusing on dodging, then you should be able to keep dodging.
Mm-hmm. When we wrote up the dodge and parry rules for FF Legend, we had it that it's a optional thing you can take, but if you fail, you can make it worse on yourself.
However, I would make some exceptions. Like, for example, if 100 archers decided to all fire at you at once, you can't exactly dodge all 100 arrows.
No, but this is why you have a Spartan shield on hand for those situations.
Or a buddy you could just use as a shield.
Mm-hmm. Like, I can get that, but in terms of normal combat, you're not going to be dealing with 100 archers unless you're doing mass combat rules. At which point, that's kind of gonna be redundant.
That or your name is Kaladin Stormblessed.
Yes, but obviously, then we have damage. The base strike damage is your physical power plus 1d10. You know, we already talked about how power rolls work, and that's kind of what it's going into here. And obviously, when you're reduced to 0 HP, you're dead. HP cannot go into the negatives. If the damage would reduce you below 0, then set yourself at 0.
So there is no near death. There is only alive and dead.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, if you've got certain items, you can bring people back, but that's another matter. Though what I do appreciate is that even if you win the encounter, if anybody's dead, they still get XP.
Well, that's kind of a staple of JRPGs that I've seen. It's like, doesn't matter if you're dead or not, you still get it.
Yeah, some of them, after combat, they'll bring you back with like 1 HP, which I'm perfectly fine with.
I mean, you did participate in the combat, so you did learn something.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, don't get killed.
Yeah. And then we have Affinity, which is how the different elemental types work with each other. And this is largely replicating how it ends up working in the video games anyways. You have strong, so damage and ailment effect rate are both halved. Null, no damage and no ailments can be applied. Drain, self-explanatory, I think. Ailments don't apply with Drain. Repel is very self-explanatory, and I love Repel. And Weak, damage and effect rate are doubled.
It's super effective.
Mm-hmm. And you have kind of an order of operations. Repel, Drain, Null, Strong, Weak. In terms of an order of priority. The reason why it says ailment effect rate is some skills will denote that they have a percentile chance to inflict a status effect. Like say Zeo is a lightning affinity spell that has I think it was like a 20% chance to inflict stun. Which some people are gonna roll the effect separately. I'm just gonna say if you get under your TN, you hit. If you get under your TN and you get under 20, you hit and stun.
That makes sense. I mean, after all, if it's a chance and you just got a good high enough roll, why not?
Mm-hmm. In that regard, I'd handle it not too far removed from the cap check in Emberwind.
Good old cap check.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, we go into ways to recover HP and MP, and then the different types of ailments. So we have Stone, Petrify. Fly, which is not you flying, it is due to Bile's curse, you're turned into a fly. And all stats other than agility are treated as their 1, and all damage received is doubled.
Man, that one really bugs me.
Let's see. Stun. When making attacks against enemies, the TN for the check will be whichever is lower. Your current value or 25%.
You stunned him just as he was waking up.
Mm-hmm. Charm is self-explanatory. Poison. You have all damage you inflict with attacks. Each time you take a non-reactive action, you lose 1d10 HP. Outside of combat for each Kagetsuchi phase, you lose 1d10 HP. Can only be healed by magic or items.
So basically a dot.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Mute. Can't use spells. Restrained. You cannot take any actions at all, dodging included, and any physical element attacks you receive become critical hits. Let's see. Freeze. You become frozen. You may not take any actions at all. Physical element attacks that hit you become critical hits. Also, you take physical element damage normally, even if you have Repel, Null, Drain, or Strong against physical. Then Sleep, self-explanatory. But at the start of each of your turns, you recover HP and MP equal to your Vitality plus level. I actually like how they have Sleep here.
Yeah, I like the next one, though. Panic. You've lost your mind and cannot take sensible actions. Wait, you mean I just got my income taxes?
Whenever you attempt to take any action, there's a 50% chance you will instead take a different stranger action. This chance is present even if you choose to do nothing at all. Roll 1d10 on the panic table and apply its effects.
You hurt yourself in your confusion.
And shock. You've taken an electric shock, keeping you from acting. You can take no actions at all, dodging included. Physical element attacks that hit you become critical hits. And we also have special ailments, such as instant kill. You are dead. Your HP is 0.
Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Go directly to corpse.
Or curse, as I mentioned before. You're suffering from a curse, usually caused by fumbling checks or being targeted with a curse. Your automatic failure range for all checks increases to 86 through 99. Whenever you take any action, there is a 30% chance that something bad befalls you. The GM will tell you what happens.
So it applies to every action, too. Oh, that's nice.
I may use this to do the running gag of things falling on your head.
Oh darn! Look at all those pianos falling from the sky.
Uh, then ailment effect rate. Usually attacks that inflict ailments will indicate a percentile chance, such as X% chance to inflict stun. After being hit with an ailment attack, if you fail your dodge, make a percentile roll. If the number rolled is equal to or less than the effect rate, you take the ailment. When a PC would take an ailment, that PC's player does the roll. When an NPC would take an ailment, the GM rolls. When an ailment attack rolls a critical hit, the effect rate is doubled. It is also doubled if the dodge check fumbles. Otherwise, affinity ratings may adjust the effect rate. These modifiers all stack, but an effect rate can never be lower than 5% or higher than 95%. So it is rolled separately, but if I'm being honest, I wouldn't do that in my runs.
I do like that they've got the whole ailment priority. That is a nice thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that you can say, hey, you can get hit with the same ailment multiple times, but it's only the highest priority that takes it.
Yeah. And the priority is on a descending setup, because obviously the highest priority is going to be death. I will admit, just looking at this from a PDF, these particular having to turn it on the side things are a pet peeve, but it's not a deal breaker.
I hope that they have I actually hope that they have a printed DM screen with that on it, because that actually is a really good thing to have.
I don't think there's a DM screen. DM screens aren't as much of a thing with Japanese tabletop, from what I've seen.
True.
But
you could easily make one.
Yeah, and there's horizontal based and vertical blank GM screens that you can just print a few pages off and fill it in. But after that, obviously, we have saving versus ailment. You can make a save against it. Usually these saves are vitality checks, and if successful, you recover from the ailment. Some ailments are automatically removed at the end of combat. But
I like that it says there, though, over mute, stun, poison, curse, and death cannot be naturally recovered from in this way. Well, gee, I wonder why.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can't recover from death. I mean, it's not like it's a permanent status effect or something.
Yeah. Then we get to actions with NPC demons. Not counting passive skills, NPC demons use the skills they possess in order, starting from the top of the skill list.
Okay, that's nice too, so that they actually have an order of how they're going to do it.
Mm-hmm. If they possess a healing skill, they'll use it once they're at half or less HP. For this reason, GMs may wish to use self-destruction skills once the NPC has less than a quarter of HP remaining. Lastly, if a demon cannot pay the cost of a skill, then it makes a basic strike. Though you can decide their actions randomly if you so choose, using a D10.
Which also makes sense, considering demons are bound by randomness when it comes to their leveling, too.
Mm-hmm. If you roll a 9 or a 10, roll a number with no skill assigned, or roll a skill that can't be used, like a passive. Then the demon makes a basic strike. And then we have post-combat. You always get XP from encounters. You can't lose XP, which is more than I could say for some of the early entries in the series, like the original ones on the NES, where enemies like the Loa or Vampire could do level down effects.
Oof, I always hated level down effects in games.
Everybody hates level down effects. It's even worse if you're dealing with games that are on some sort of a time limit. But we also have item drops, which are listed. There are two types: normal and bonus. Normal is exactly what it sounds like, although the GM may add other droppable items if the story demands. Then bonus. After combat, the GM makes a percentile roll. On a 1, the players receive any high-value item of the GM's choice, such as a gem. On a 2 to 10, they receive a life stone. If the character
They
has
get a rock.
If the character has the Lucky Find skill and is alive at the end of combat, they make this roll instead of the GM. A success grants a life stone, whereas a critical grants a high-value item of the GM's choice.
I do like that. They get a rock.
I probably would have it that the luck attribute can modify that roll instead of it having it be a basic percentile roll. Especially
or
with such a
just
low
expand
rate.
it.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, maybe give players the options, choose between they get to do the roll, or actually, you know what? Let them so that they can do the roll themselves and use their own fate points to change the roll, or change the scope of the roll, like the range.
Yeah, if you want to keep it where it's you get a good thing by rolling a 1 or a 2 through 10, just add the luck stat to whoever's rolling to that minimum.
Yeah, that works too.
Let's see. Some NPCs or demons can have a boss trait to indicate that it's more powerful. A boss can be made more challenging by also having it appear with 1 to 4 NPC demons close to the PC's level. And
this definitely doesn't sound like a video game to me.
And some of the things that it can do are, and hey there, Kiwi, welcome to the party. Take 2 actions per turn, which is particularly nasty in this system, as we've seen. GMs decide boss actions as strategically as possible. May use fate points. Access the boss of exclusive skills. HP and M increase roughly doubles over base. See the boss demon section on page 213, which we'll get to later. Grant additional XP and Maka. You probably saw it, but Maka is the currency in the Megaten universe.
Yeah.
And ability to use items.
Ooh, that could be fun.
Yeah. Furthermore, according to the GM's needs, they may decide to add certain skills or other bonuses to their boss demons. Null Element, Dark, Light, Dakunda, Dakaja, any boss exclusive skill, or when at half HP uses Beast Eye or Dragon Eye, or uses recovery items. See, and obviously we have Flee, which is, running away.
I do like that it actually says you can't do that with the boss.
Mm-hmm. We also have Ambush and back attacks. And an encounter check. Which the roll of it can determine the modifier, and the sum modifiers can determine if you have an advantage over the enemy, or if the enemy has an advantage over you. It's a nice way to mix things up, so it's not always a straight face-to-face fight. It's also
would be amusing if you tried to do an ambush and you ended up being the one at the disadvantage.
Yeah, I'd say it's also a good way to ensure that luck has its use, since luck as an attribute is something I could see a lot of people treating as a potential dump stat. I wouldn't advise using it as a dump stat, but I could see some people doing that. Though
I've always loved the way that Call of Cthulhu does luck. That is so much more fun, in my opinion.
Yeah. Though you can't really have a dump stat within this system because your starting stat block is already set.
That's true. That makes sense. Yeah, you can't really do that. It's all how you level that makes a difference.
Mm-hmm. See, then you have surprise attacks. So in an ambush, the ambushers get a plus 1d10 bonus to initiative rolls.
Which is funny because they could still end up losing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I think you've seen that where you end up getting back attacked and the enemy still gets their ass kicked.
Yep.
Speaking of which, if you get back attacked, the ambushers get that 1d10 bonus, and you don't get to roll initiative at all. It's straight agility.
Ooh, that's nice. That
And
actually does that.
let me make it even worse. The side that's being back attacked is inflicted with shock.
Shocked Pikachu face.
So getting back attacked is the worst case scenario. Of course, if the enemy gets back attacked, then it's the best case scenario. And after that, it goes into advanced combat rules such as grid combat assumptions. Though, if I'm being honest, I don't think this is a game that really fits grid combat.
No, it kind of doesn't. This has definitely got a little more theater of the mind than, grid.
Mm-hmm. That's certainly not to say you couldn't do grid combat with this system, and they do have rules for it on how attack ranges would work. But I remember when somebody wanted to do grid combat a la Final Fantasy Tactics for the FF Legends system. I didn't stop them, but they eventually dialed it back when they realized how so much snowballs out of it's like the snowball rolling down the hill when it comes to all the things you'd have to adjust.
Stuff like that gets really complex really quick.
Yeah, it's easy to say, just tweak a few things and you can do grid combat. But when so many parts of the mechanics work around a particular assumption, then it can get out of hand. My favorite example when it comes to this is the sprint debate with my time with Halo Reach, because a lot of people think, you're just adding the ability to run. Why is that such a big deal? Because a lot of the fan base really did not like sprint. Except you're effectively adding 2 movement speeds to the same map.
And that changes the entire scope of the map.
Mm-hmm. And that also changes the scope of how you use most of the weapons, especially precision weapons.
They were actually talking about this today when they were discussing some flying mounts in some games and how those can really screw things up in terms of movement.
Mm-hmm. And I'd imagine that's the reason why a lot of MMOs tend to shy away from flying mounts unless they can get away with it. And I know WoW has had flying mounts since day one, but
no. Flying mounts in WoW didn't come. The personal flying mounts didn't come in until the Burning Crusade. The flying mounts themselves, they're sure there was the the flying stations, but that really wasn't your own mount.
Yeah, and I remember when flying vehicles were added in like Dawn of War, and a lot of people really didn't like them. It was something that that Games Workshop was pushing around that time, and it didn't stick around. Like, sometimes just little things can cascade into bigger problems. Is the point.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, heck, WoW learned the lesson of how flying mounts can fuck things over when they had to completely revamp the world with Cataclysm because the entire old world didn't work.
Mm-hmm. And, of course, when it comes to little things spiraling out of control and World of Warcraft, how could I not bring up the Blood Plague incident?
Oh god, I love that. I wasn't there for that, but that was such a unique experience to hear about. And it still studied to this day by virologists.
Mm-hmm. It was all because of one little oversight.
Pets.
Yeah, one little oversight that, according to some of the stories I got told, that oversight was brought up as a potential problem, but because of how minuscule of a problem it seemed, it got overlooked.
That happens a lot in QA, especially when you're dealing with limited time frames. You got to get something out by a certain time, and so they don't really have a chance of really exploring. Plus, you're dealing with a limited player base on a testing server, so they couldn't actually predict just how big of an effect it would have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've described game design on some level as akin to a tightly wound watch. All the gears working to do one thing. If one of those gears is out of alignment, the watch doesn't keep ticking, it just stops. But obviously right after that, it's going into negotiation, but because of the fact that negotiation goes right alongside Demon Fusion, which is another hallmark of the series, that is something we'll be covering next week. Because, yeah, one of the big things that's been established for years in the Mega 10 universe is fusing demons to make better ones, or sometimes worse ones if the particular factors aren't on your side.
That's right. Just mash two demons together and you get a better demon.
Mm-hmm.
Just don't tell them that you're trying to put them in the same blender.
Yeah, it's usually done through rituals like the Cathedral of Shadows in the early games, but the principle is still the same. And this is always one of those things that has made people hesitant over the years regarding adapting Shin Megami Tensei into TTRPG form, is how do you handle all of the math when it comes to demon fusion, because there is a lot of background math that goes into it.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And that background math works perfectly fine in a video game.
Because you don't actually see it.
Mm-hmm. In a tabletop game, you gotta have all that math front and center, and I liken it to how overcomplicated, say, magic item creation could get in some TTRPGs.
Oh god, yes, that could get so crazy.
Like third edition D&D is one of my whipping boys for this kind of thing, but it's not the only whipping boy for it. It's for that reason when it came to FF Legend, I was hesitant about doing item creation in a similar manner. Mostly because I didn't want it to be this massive mess. In Sword World 2,
any edition of D&D, doesn't matter which one.
In Sword World 2.0, there was a more detailed version of item creation called processed items. As far as I know, nobody uses it because it requires very specific items from monsters or from getting them at stores. And people would rather just buy the item that they're looking for either at a store or through loot, or just get it from the GM.
Yeah, it's much easier than trying to make stuff.
It falls into the same trap that you see with some video games when it comes to their item creation, where the recipe is very specific. So you have long stretches of time where you need 3 items for a certain thing, and you don't know where to even get that third item. Like, you know what you need, you just don't know how to get it or where, and that goes for hours. So it didn't get used. And and as far as I'm aware, there hasn't been any attempt to try and bring it over into 2.5.
Thank goodness.
So it's one of those kind of things. But so far, what's your take on how the core mechanic works? I know it's largely familiar because of the D100 approach, but I don't think one could conflate this with basic.
Yeah, between the D100 and the fact that it's got the whole a lot of similar stuff to Sword World, it very familiar. It's seems quite nice. It's definitely something that I could easily get a handle on pretty quick.
Yeah. Uh,
And I do like the whole very episodic approach to it. It makes it very simple for people to get into and get started because it's very, very tightly organized in that regard.
mhm. I will note some of the order of operations with certain percentile rolls aren't exactly how I would do things, but that's a me problem. Uh, in particular, the way effects work, like having you roll them separately, is not something I would be doing personally. And I appreciate the attempt when it comes to advanced combat, but I have a strong feeling most people who are going to be running a Mega 10 RPG are not going to use it.
Yeah, that makes sense. It doesn't seem like something that most people would want to use. It just adds needless complications.
Plus, well, Mega 10 has made attempts to do a grid-based tactics RPG in the past. Um, it has only done that a bare handful of times. If I'm being honest, one of those times was in the Last Bible games, and it was the Last Bible spin-off on the Game Boy. It wasn't very good. It was, even on the Game Boy, if you want a tactics RPG, there are better options. But when it comes to, but that's really the worst of it that I could say. I will admit that there's some interesting approaches to certain things, and I do like the way the fate points work, especially since there's no real cap on them. So somebody's inevitably going to try and go Nova with them. But
isn't that always fun though?
But a lot of what I'm saying has the asterisk of this may end up changing once we get into the negotiation and fusion mechanics, because that's something that it's going to need to get right. Hydra says, wait, what about Devil Survivor? I never played Devil Survivor, but I don't recall that if that was doing a tactics RPG approach, then I take that back, but I didn't play either of the Devil Survivor games. So that's something I'll have to look into. I've played my fair share of Mega 10, but I'm not going to say I played everything in the franchise, especially since some entries have never been translated and some you can only get on Japanese flip phones.
Damn, now that is what I call a very limited release.
Mm-hmm. But
of course, who am I kidding? There's also a game that's out there that can only be played on iPods and a very specific subset of iPods.
Or one of the best mobile touchscreen games I've ever played. You can't play anymore unless you have a specific version of iOS. Yes, how could I not bring up Infinity Blade?
I don't remember that one.
The Infinity Blade trilogy is an interesting beast in an attempt to do swordplay on a touchscreen. It was really good for its time, but because it didn't update with iOS changes, it's unplayable.
Oh, okay. The one I was referring to was Song Summoner: The Unsung Heroes, which was actually a Square Enix game on iPods.
Mm-hmm.
And it was basically a Final Fantasy Tactics where you used songs in your playlist to summon characters.
Mm-hmm. Yep. But as I said, next week we will be tackling the negotiation and fusion systems for Tokyo Conception. But so far, so good. I've only really had a couple nitpicks here and there, and that's it. I will be interested when we get into equipment, because that's going to play a factor into how I feel about human characters.
Yeah,
Since
that's the one thing I'm curious about too, especially when it comes to the weapons.
some people haven't liked the way that the way things work with humans in this system. I'm putting a big ol' asterisk on that until we get to that point. But it's at this time that I will also note that while we are not doing the Cloister of the Dice tomorrow, we are going to be doing something tomorrow. At around 3 p.m., so the usual time for Cloister, I'm going to be doing a return of the Hangover Shit Show, because there were some things that dropped during the Game Awards that I do want to talk about, and some things adjacent that I want to talk about, including having the perfect excuse to talk about a RuneQuest video game.
Wait, they're doing one?
Yeah.
Oh shit, that's cool.
It's being done by the same people who did the Battle Sector Warhammer 40k game.
Ooh.
So we will talk about that tomorrow, along with about a total of 42 different projects.
Yeah, there were some surprises last night, that's for darn sure.
Mm-hmm. And of the surprises that a lot of people are thinking of, those are maybe 1/3 at most of what I've got on the list. Because with these lists, obviously, I'm not just going to be covering what was at the Game Awards, but what was also announced adjacent and beforehand. Since there were a few showcases before the Game Awards. But that is a story for another night. So until...
Yes, tomorrow night.
Yes. So until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.